Okay. Yeah, you read one? Okay. Well, I can just put things down here. It's a little bit cumbersome. There's the purple. Okay.
Okay.
I think we can fit it all here. I'll skip that. It's all sort of in order. So.
We've got 6 minutes.
We can take our masks off after we get rolling, Kevin. Good morning. The opening words are by Walt Whitman. Swiftly arose and spread around me the peace and knowledge that pass all the argument of the earth. And I know that the hand of God is the promise of my own. And I know that the Spirit of God is the brother of my own. And that all the men ever born are also my brothers, and the women my sisters and lovers, and that a keelson of the creation is love. The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. The chalice, half of the symbol, flames with nothing but a flickering candle. If the little flame reminds you of light or truth or love or burning hope and faith, know this: its life is with us. The truth, the love, the faith is with us. In our hands, which held together shape a chalice, a shared cup that harbors and heals.
Hi, my name's Bob, and I'm a Unitarian. Oh, all right, you know what to do. My name's Bob, and I'm a Unitarian. Thank you. I got the wonderful job of welcoming you all to Eliot Chapel on this, well, we'll say semi-gorgeous September morning. What a pleasure to have you with us. We are so glad that you've chosen to join us today. If you are new or newish, please know that our congregation is strengthened by your presence in it. And we hope you find that you draw strength from us as well. Eliot Chapel is an intentionally diverse community which seeks earnestly to achieve Dr. Martin Luther King's dream of beloved community. Whatever your ethnic background, whatever your financial circumstances, whomever you love, wherever you find yourself on your faith journey, you are welcome here, and you will find a place here among us if you choose to remain. We are so glad to have you this morning, and we hope that what we have to say today will reach you in an important way. A few little business items. We still require that everybody in the church wear a mask at all times except when speaking. Although I have to say that Adam, who can play the trombone with a mask on, makes me feel silly for taking it off when I'm talking. So for the foreseeable future, everybody inside the church should wear a mask as long as they are inside the church. For the time being, we are not meeting after church in our custom Unitarian sacrament of coffee and conversation. Rather, we're doing that virtually on Zoom, and the Zoom coffee hour starts at noon, after 1 hour after the end of the service. 12:30? I knew I'd mess something up. Sorry, thank you very much for the correction. Our hymns today are chosen because they were poems before they were hymns. And if I can just say a moment, in general, what we're going to try to do is bring poetry, some that we've written and some that we love, about spiritual matters. And I think we begin in a perfectly beautiful way if you'll rise as you are willing and able and sing hymn number 38, which used to be called the Unitarian National Anthem, Morning Has Broken.
Morning has broken.
Please join with me in a unison reading of the Eliot Unitarian Congregational Covenant, found on your order service. As a free congregation, we promise to one another our mutual trust and support. To create beloved community, we promise to be kinder to each other than we have to be. To listen fully to each other with an open mind and heart. To speak responsibly and respectfully. To find ways to improve our church for all members and friends.
I've chosen two poems for my meditative poems this morning from sources that most of you will recognize. The first, a very famous poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins, who was a devout Catholic and therefore more likely to use the word God than we are in the Unitarian Church. So, glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of coupled color as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire-cold chestnut falls, finches' wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow, and plow, and all trades their gear and tackle and trim. All things counter, original, spare, strange. Whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle, dim. He fathers forth, whose beauty is past change. Praise him. And the second meditative poem that I've picked this morning is by the famous American poet Richard Wilbur. And I still think, and I think Bruce and I agree about this is one of the most beautiful poems in American literature. And it's called, paradoxically, Love Calls Us to the Things of This World. The eyes open to a cry of pulleys, and spirited from sleep, the astounded soul hangs for a moment bodiless and simple as false dawn. Outside the open window, the morning air is all awash with angels. Some are in bed sheets, some in blouses, some are in smocks, but truly, there they are. Now they are rising together in calm swells of halcyon feeling, filling whatever they wear with the deep joy of their impersonal breathing. Now they are flying in place, conveying the terrible speed of their omnipresence, moving and staying like white water. And now, of a sudden, they swoon down into so rapt a quiet that nobody seems to be there. The soul shrinks from all that it is about to remember, from the punctual rape of every blessed day, and cries, "Oh, let there be nothing on earth but laundry, nothing but rosy hands in the rising steam and clear dances done in the sight of heaven." Yet as the sun acknowledges with a warm look the world's hunks and colors, the soul descends once more in bitter love to accept the waking body, saying now in a changed voice, as the man yawns and rises, "Bring them down from their ruddy gallows. Let there be clean linen for the backs of thieves. Let lovers go sweet and fresh to be undone, and the heaviest nuns walk in a pure floating of dark habits, keeping their difficult balance."
So we meditate, we sit for a while with Richard Wilbur's image of the soul hearkening at last to the cry of pulleys, to the squeaking laundry lines like ruddy gallows, and at last exhorting, let there be clean linen for the backs of thieves. It's not too hard to nudge our prayerful selves to welcome another poet to sit with us, one who seems easy company wherever he finds himself. A former poet laureate of the United States, Billy Collins. And on this, the eve of Labor Day and the end of summer, it is a blessing, maybe a moment of grace, to imagine shoveling snow with Buddha. It's a poem that he wrote. It's a title. And so here it is, Shoveling Snow with Buddha by Billy Collins. In the usual iconography of the temple or the local walk, you would never see him doing such a thing, tossing the dry snow over the mountain of his bare, round shoulder, his hair tied in a knot, a model of concentration. Sitting is more his speed, if that is the word for what he does or does not do. Even the season is wrong for him. In all his manifestations, it is not warm. Is it not warm and slightly humid? Let me read that line again. In all his manifestations, is it not warm and slightly humid? Is this not implied by his serene expression, that smile so wide it wraps itself around the waist of the universe? But here we are, working our way down the driveway, one shovelful at a time. We toss the light powder into the clear air. We feel the cold mist on our faces, and with every heave we disappear and become lost to each other in these sudden clouds of our own making, these fountain bursts of snow. This is so much better than a sermon in church, I say out loud as Buddha keeps shoveling. This is the true religion, the religion of snow and sunlight and winter geese barking in the sky, I say. But he is too busy to hear me. He has thrown himself into shoveling snow, as if it were the purpose of existence, as if the sign of a perfect life were a clear driveway. You could drive the car down easily and drive off into the vanities of the world with a broken heater fan and a song on the radio. All morning long we work side by side, me with my commentary and he inside the generous pocket of his silence, until the hour is nearly noon and the snow is piled high all around us. Then I hear him speak. After this, he asks, "Can we go inside and play cards?" "Certainly," I reply, "and I will heat some milk and bring some cups of hot chocolate to the table while you shuffle the deck." And our boots stand dripping by the door. "Ah," says the Buddha, lifting his eyes and leaning for a moment on his shovel before he drives the thin blade again deep into the glittering snow. The second poem I chose for our meditation is not a poem, but a paragraph, prose paragraph. Find it first before I proceed. This is a prose paragraph from a novel by Louise Erdrich. The novel is titled The Painted Drum. You may know it. If you had been here in these pews on Valentine's Day in 2016, you heard this paragraph as our meditative prayer. For some reason, I copied it down in my journal and recently rediscovered it and thought, perfect. After I've finished reading, you'll know because I'll stop talking, I invite you to be with your own thoughts in silence. And if you are so moved, to speak the names of those you wish to remember. She begins, life will break you. Nobody can protect you from that. And living alone won't either. For solitude will also break you with its yearning. You have to love. You have to feel. It is the reason you are here on earth. You are here to risk your heart. You are here to be swallowed up. And when it happens that you are broken, or betrayed, or left, or hurt, or death brushes near, let yourself sit by an apple tree and listen to the apples falling all around you in heaps, wasting their sweetness. Tell yourself that you tasted as many as you could. A moment of silence. Let's sing the meditative hymn 86 and be seated.
Our offering this morning will be shared with Southside Early Childhood Center, which, as some of you know, was founded in the 19th century by Unitarian women and has continued for more than 100 years to provide not just care, but research into the best method for providing care and education for preschool children. The offering will now be gratefully accepted. Will the ushers come forward? Please join me in the unison words of dedication. The work of the church. I wrote this poem in a Christmas season that was fraught, and as is, I would suppose, not unfrequently the case in families feeling a little bit on the outside of what was actually going on with mothers and daughters and grandchildren. And it's called St. Joseph Speaks of the Flight to Egypt. I was never much involved with it, you know. I was the one from the crowd at the magic show who holds the card, stands blinking in the light an instant, then sinks out of sight for good. At first, the baby was a foreign thing. I was afraid of it. The father's solacing won't stop a baby's hunger. I said my role was discipline, the shaping of his soul. But that comes later. Truth was, he needed tits and blankets and a crooning voice. My wits and hands were made for working wood, not cuddling. Not much for softness then, but good for getting on with things. That seems to me God's mind in all of this, to pick on me as I might choose a favorite thumb-worn awl to fit a task. I struggled. Then the call came clearly. First the birthing, then the kings, then nighttime signs and wonders, then angels' wings fanned beasts to speech. Of course I came around, but there's slim comfort to be found in standing by at miracles. I looked at them, the babe and mother, late one night in Bethlehem, and saw that they were my flesh and not my flesh, and saw that God had chosen thus to mesh himself and humankind. And I saw that I must hold whatever comfort I could gather from the cold and somber truth. I could have been anyone. But best of all, in all that I've done, I have the memory of our sudden flight, the word made known in secret in the night, the highway hostile to the foot and gray with frost, the beast recalcitrant, the mother lost in dreamy terror, the babe wide-eyed as if he knew, and I walking beside with half our worldly goods upon my back. I bore them up. I puzzled out the track when they could not. I led them south towards safety in the dark. Was I then less than Moses when he led the people north? Did I express less of the Maker's majesty? I'm in my place, in shadow, but within his grace. And my revenge is that he planned in vain until I let him carry out his will. I have a superego who has a name. His name is Christopher. And he appears in several of my narrative poems, as he does in this one. So when you see another character pop in here with his tweed jacket with the leather elbow patches and the pipe full of shag tobacco smelling vaguely of rum, that's him. This is modeled on sermons of Puritan preachers, and this one takes its name from a Puritan sermon, but the phrase was also adapted by the great Southern writer Flannery O'Connor, who used it as her. She said, "My subject in general has been the action of grace in territory held largely by the devil," and that is the name of this poem, On the Action of Grace in Territory Held Largely by the Devil. Dear friends, let us consider the extent to which we give ourselves to invidious distinctions, differences not different at all, but simply varied paths by which we come at last to the universal goal, which would be death. Allow me Even now, as Christopher fires up his pipe in the overstuffed armchair beside the fireplace in the brown study of my preconscious mind, allow me to mention the issue of suffering and death before he nods his large, now grizzled head in tolerant acceptance of my point, and then goes on to show why I miss the thing entirely, and furthermore, because of my proclivity for errors in logic, am scarcely to be trusted in such morally equivocal and constantly shifting terrain. But suffering and death. These occupy all my thoughts these days, and I see that not one human but falls prey to them, if not in conjunction, then at least in sequence. And I see that not one human but considers them unfair in his or her personal case, but somewhat equivocal in the cases of others, with the degree of unfairness, usually but not always inversely proportional to the square of the distance, physical or social, between them. And I see that every human being agrees that everything that lives must die, but fails to go on to the corollary, namely that what applies to all must apply to each. And so it is that we humans see the future as a weave of chance, opportunities and perils making a thicket, to be navigated with great care, as offering at every turn the gravest danger, but concealing sometimes how cleverly the paths that lead through to whatever is expressed by the ill-considered end of fairy tales, the glory that we imagine will allow us to live happily ever after. When in fact, as Gray reminded us so solemnly that neither Christopher nor I can quite believe that anyone could forget it, the hour is inevitable, and all the paths perilous or glorious, and all the quests lead to the grave. But suffering, you've left out suffering, says Christopher, knocking the bowl of his pipe against the side of his shoe. It wants saying that suffering is not inevitable in any of what you've gone on about so far. Then let me dilate for a moment upon what we see as suffering, since surely a convincing sign of grace might be the luck to avoid it. Or to avoid causing it, Christopher interjects, and we can grant him that point, I believe, if we can get him to accept that there are those, a few, for whom the causing of suffering is a source of joy. Granted, indeed, he says with a wave of the hand. But here's the thing. What is it, after all, this suffering? As I lean forward to poke the logs back into blaze and his puffed pipe glows with the heat of inspiration, the thought that comes to mind is Joan of Arc, lashed to the post of her slow fire, her legs already black and bleeding where the skin has cooked, her small breasts blistered, her young eyes white with the unspeakable pain, screaming for water or death until the very strain of screaming takes her for a blessed moment out of consciousness, and her eyes, still open, sag with the dull sadness of a student who has seen the lesson but has failed to understand. The suffering, I think, must last until she knows that she will die. Then without hope, no suffering? Asks Christopher, leaning forward. Sure, he has me now. And I'm forced to grant it. Not as much, at least. And is it grace then, after all, that takes the hope away, that fixes our attention on the gray stone of the tomb? The question sets me thinking of the somber men who set the fire, who all claimed grace as property and sought to burn it into her. But as I picture them, they cannot look at what they've done, and so, like Joan, must come away from it not having understood the lesson quite. And then the room we sit in, as it always does, dissolves into reality where Christopher is an odd-shaped figment of my subconscious, and Joan, perhaps a waitress at the diner down the block who whines about relationships. in the great stone spire of the burned cathedral at Salisbury, a skeletal finger burnt free of flesh, pointing to the source of fire and grace. Gray and full of moment, a tombstone for us all.
Thanks. Well, I'd like to read 4 short poems that seem to me poems for a world in need of grace, which is the title of today's service. But before I commence, I want to say that it was here in Eliot Chapel, at Eliot Chapel, when our now Minister Emeritus John Robinson was in the pulpit every Sunday, that I first considered grace very seriously. I was raised in what now in retrospect seems a stern New Englandish kind of religion. But here I heard something about grace as a gift, not something earned or withheld, just given, just received. Also in those early days, when I heard about grace given, I was teaching at a boys' prep school. Its reputation was built on toughness and discipline. But boys and girls do get themselves into trouble, often. And in faculty discussions about what to do with one or another student who had crossed the line, I heard, especially from my Cambridge-educated department chair, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." I imagine that as a boy, he heard his elders speak of his various dire predicaments in the same way. But it was music to my ears, and it changed my life in a very important way. So now, back to my 4 poems. Each poem is, in my mind, suffused with grace, an awareness of a gift, perhaps one's keen appreciation of inexplicable wonder of the sacred, or in one's acceptance of the gift of life and death, or recognizing the gift of a spouse or friend who, unbidden, lifts you up. Maybe you can match those phrases with the poems. The first poem is entitled About Marriage. Interesting. By Denise Levertov. A personal note. As some of you may know, and all of you will know after a bit of cake you may take as you pass through Adams Hall after the service, a few weeks ago, Sharon and I got married. Not in Eliot Chapel as we had once planned, but in Maine, in a green, airy space, as the poet says. My daughter Claire read this poem, Levertov's poem, beneath an ancient apple tree. I hope you will enjoy the poem and that you will think about it, about the relevance of a little story Levertov tells of an afternoon in a city park, its relevance to the marriage she proposes, and how the poem and marriage may also be evidence of grace. So here it is, about marriage. Don't lock me in wedlock. I want marriage, an encounter. I told you about the green light of May, a veil of quiet befallen the downtown park, late Saturday afternoon, long shadows and cool air, scent of new grass, fresh leaves, blossom on the threshold of abundance. And the birds I met there, birds of passage, breaking their journey. 3 birds, each of a different species. The azalea-breasted with the round pall, dark, the brindled, merry, mouse-gliding one, and the smallest, golden as gorse and wearing a black Venetian mask. And with them, the 3 deuce henbirds, feathered in tender, lively brown. I stood a half hour under the enchantment. No one passed near. The birds saw me and let me be near them. It's not irrelevant. I would be met and meet you so, in a green, airy space, not locked in. The next 2 poems are by Jane Kenyon, one of my favorite American poets. They're kind of connected to each other. They're in the same book, but they both deal with the same subject. The first one is Otherwise. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day I know it will be otherwise. Let evening come. Let the light of late afternoon shine through the chinks in the barn, moving up the bales as the sun moves down. Let the cricket take up chafing as a woman takes up her needles and her yarn. Let evening come. Let dew collect on the hoe abandoned in the long grass. Let the stars appear and the moon disclose her silver horn. Let the fox go back to its sandy den. Let the wind die down. Let the shed go black inside. Let evening come. To the bottle in the ditch, to the scoop in the oats, to the air in the lung, let evening come. Let it come as it will, and don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless. So let evening come. The last poem is by Anne Fisher Worth. And it's from a book called Mississippi. It's a collaboration between Anne, who is a Mississippi poet, and Maud Schuyler Clay, who is a Mississippi photographer. Both of them have fine reputations in the state of Mississippi. And what Maud would do, Maud and Anne do not live in the same town, but they would see each other occasionally, and they would say that, we should get together and collaborate. And so they finally figured out that Maud would send Anne a few hundred poems, and Anne could do with them whatever she wished, according to their agreement. And so she would choose one and just listen to how the photograph was speaking to her, and she would write a poem based on that. So sometimes the photographs don't really seem to have much to do with what Anne has written. I'm not going to pass this around, but the photograph that she is responding to here is a photograph of a lake in Mississippi at sundown. It's a beautiful evening photograph. So just, you don't have to study this very carefully, just keep that in mind. So here's how it goes. It's written in from the point of view, I think you'll figure this out pretty fast, a young mother with a couple of kids. Swear to God, what with Billy's croup and the baby's cutting teeth, sometimes I'm up all night, baby on the boob, me and Billy and baby crouching by the kettle in the steam tent. Sometimes I get so tired my face breaks out all gray with little red spots. One supper, I burned the fish sticks, stank up the kitchen something good. Billy looks at me, Mama! So I threw the plates to the floor and commenced to cry. But that sweet man cracks me a beer, scoops up Billy and the baby, winks at me, tells me, we'll mess with this shit later, puts us in the truck, and drives us to the lake. Breathe, he tells me. Baby, breathe. And look at it. Just look at it. What's next? Closing hymn. Number 64. And after all this music and poetry, you might forget about the cake, but don't. Stop there now. All right, good.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Krista Taves. Please remain standing for our benediction. With gratitude, we leave with gratitude for the blessing of grace that we have received from Bruce and Bob. As we leave, may we carry this flame in our hearts, the flame of light, of truth, of community, and may we ourselves be blessed with the gift of grace until we meet again. Amen and blessed be. Now may we be seated for the postlude.